So hello everyone. In the series of lectures, today we would be learning about one of the most important topic of current affairs related to environment, and it is the climate change. So before knowing climate change, we first have to discuss certain terms. So in this lecture, first we would be knowing what is climate change, what is it. Second, what are certain terms that are associated with it. Then third, what are the impacts of climate change. And then certain miscellaneous things we would be discussing about. Miscellaneous thing would be involving the actions taken, right? Some of our initiatives. This we would be learning in this whole set of lecture. So welcome everyone. Let us start with knowing what is climate change. So first of all, let us know what is the difference between climate and weather. There are two things, climate and weather. Weather is a short term phenomenon, climate is a long term phenomenon. So for example, today it is raining, right? Yesterday it was a bright sunlight, but today it is raining. It is called as change of weather, right? However, if I say during May and June, the intensity of heat, the intensity of sun's heat, the intensity of sunshine is changing or increasing the temperature over a long period of time, then this example would be part of a climate change example. So this difference between climate and weather has to be clear. Weather is a short term phenomena. For example, during let's say today, during morning it was bright sunshine, but at the evening it was let's say it started raining. So this is a short term phenomena. However, climate is a long term phenomena. So whenever we say about climate change, or when we are discussing about climate change, we are actually talking about the long term change in Earth's climatic conditions. For example, recently it was in news that 2023, that is this year, is the hottest year I think of this century. I am not sure about the exact data, but it is said that 2023 was the hottest year of this century. So this is actually not a problem of weather, this is the problem of climate. So this we would be discussing about in climate change. Now let us understand certain terms involving climate change. So first term is greenhouse gas. Greenhouse gas. So what is a greenhouse gas? You see, this is Earth. Let me draw it for you. This is our Earth, right? Now our Earth is surrounded by a layer of atmosphere. So this is a layer of atmosphere around Earth. Now what happens actually is, this is, let's say this is, here it is sun, okay? So what happens is, when sunlight reaches Earth in this way, let's say the average temperature of Earth is 15 degrees Celsius, the Earth's surface, right? Now let's say sun's ray or sun's light hit the Earth's surface. After hitting the Earth's surface, it goes back to atmosphere, and through atmosphere it leaves the atmosphere and go in outer space. Now this sunlight would carry certain amount of heat with it, and it would strike the Earth's surface, and when it leaves, it also carries away the heat with it. So in that way the average temperature remains to be 15 degrees Celsius. This is a normal phenomenon. However, due to certain anthropogenic activities and also some natural activities, we see there are certain elements, certain molecules in this atmosphere. So let's say there is a gas called carbon dioxide, or let's say there is a gas called methane, CH3. There is another gas called as nitrogen dioxide, NO2. Similarly, there is chlorofluorocarbon. Now, these four actually are the greenhouse gases. Why they are called so? Because what happens is, whenever sun's light or sun's light hit the earth's surface, and when it tries to go back through atmosphere to outer space, if these gases are present in the atmosphere, they would, yes, if these gases are present in atmosphere, these gases would trap the sun's light. So what happens is, actually this is a when sun's radiation come here, the sun's radiation is of a high wavelength, right? It has high wavelength. When it strikes earth's surface and it goes back, its wavelength reduces. Now when it is going back through atmosphere, and certain molecules like methane, carbon dioxide, nitrogen dioxide or chlorofluorocarbon is present, these molecules would trap this radiation. This outgoing radiation is being trapped by these molecules, and what happens then is they increases the overall temperature, because you see now sun's energy, now sun's heat is not going outside, it is being trapped in the atmosphere of earth. Now when this energy is trapped in the atmosphere of earth, obviously the temperature would be rising. So earth's temperature would rise, and this rise in temperature is called as greenhouse gas effect. It is also called as global warming, right? So this is the basic fundamental of global warming. Now, as I have told you, there are four important greenhouse gases. The first is carbon dioxide, the second is methane, the third is nitrogen dioxide, and fourth is chlorofluorocarbon. Now each molecule have its own capacity to trap the heat, to trap the sun's outgoing radiation. So for example, it is said that it is in this ratio. Let's say one molecule of carbon dioxide is here, if it traps the heat. However, one molecule of methane can capture 20 times the heat that the molecule of carbon dioxide. Similarly, one molecule of nitrogen dioxide captures 40 times the heat that a single molecule of carbon dioxide captures. And then if we talk about chlorofluorocarbon, it is 1000 times more polluting. That is, one molecule of chlorofluorocarbon traps 1000 times the heat that one molecule of carbon dioxide traps. So out of these four greenhouse gases, the most dangerous is chlorofluorocarbon, because it is 1000 times more polluting or 1000 times more impactful than carbon dioxide, right? So this has to be understood. Now what happens is, actually post industrial revolution, we are witnessing a rise in these four gases. The rise in production of CO2, methane, nitrogen dioxide and chlorofluorocarbon, right? So I would be discussing each and every gas with you, but for let's say for simple example, post industrial revolution there was discovery of, let's say, diesel engine or petrol engine, right? Internal combustion engine. Now what happens is in a combustion, it takes oxygen, a fuel is burned, and it leaves carbon dioxide. Now the concentration of carbon dioxide is increasing day by day. Now as carbon dioxide is increasing in atmosphere, the impact of its greenhouse impact is also increasing. That is, the temperature of earth is also increasing. Similarly, there is rise of methane, nitrogen dioxide, chlorofluorocarbon. Chlorofluorocarbon, as you all know, was earlier used in refrigerators as a coolant, right? So these are 4 important greenhouse gases, and remember, this is the most important thing. The impact of these 4 gases has to be known. The ratio of their polluting level. So 1 ratio, 20 ratio, 40 ratio, 1000. Now I was discussing about different type of gases, these 4 gases. So carbon dioxide, as you all know, we breathe in and we exhale carbon dioxide. Similarly, during combustion, carbon dioxide is produced. So when there are more number of vehicle, more use of fossil fuels, petrol, diesel, firewood, etc., carbon dioxide, the production of carbon dioxide increases. Similarly, the forests are the natural sink of carbon dioxide. What happens in a forest? A tree actually takes carbon dioxide and then releases oxygen. So in that way it reduces the carbon dioxide. So what happening now is forests are being cut. Now as forests are being cut, their ability to capture carbon dioxide from atmosphere is also reducing, and in that way greenhouse gas impact is also increasing. So overall carbon dioxide is increasing in the atmosphere. Now let us look at the second gas, that is methane, CH3. So what are the sources of methane? As I have told you, it is 20 times more polluting than carbon dioxide, right? So let us discuss from where this gas methane come from. So there are various processes from where methane come from. For example, the paddy fields. Yes, this is a paddy field. So what happened in a paddy field is, this paddy field water is logged here, no? Now this is paddy. There is the anaerobic decomposition of certain husk here, and due to which methane is produced, right? And this methane is of significant amount. Similarly, the landfill sites. What happens in a landfill site is, certain amount of garbage, let's say biodegradable garbage is submerged under the land and a layer of soil is applied on it. Then what happens is, that the anaerobic decomposition of certain biodegradable elements happens, and due to which we see the production of methane is there, right? Similarly, the termites, in Hindi it is called as Dimak, right? So termites, these termites actually destroy our wooden furniture, and when they do so, they also produce certain amount of methane, right? Similarly, the the fart and burp of cattle also do produce a significant amount of methane is produced in the fart and burp of cattle. So cattle rearing is also a significant contributor of generation of methane, right? So this we were discussing. One more important thing is the permafrost. What is permafrost? The permafrost. What happens in a permafrost? It is a layer of actually in Arctic region there is permanent layer of ice. Over this ice there is certain amount of soil and grasses that have grown. However, the base of this soil is a permanent ice. So let's say this is a permanent ice. Here is certain soil and grass is there, and this is however is ice, right? So now what happens is, due to rise of temperature, this permanent layer of ice is being melting. When this ice melts, as this ice melts, what happens is the layer, the permafrost actually reduces, and as this permafrost reduces there is significant increase in methane. Why increase in methane? Because in this layer of ice there are certain elements, certain animals, certain insects are there whose bodies have been trapped. Now as this ice melt, their bodies are exposed to atmosphere, and now as their bodies are exposed to atmosphere, they started decomposing, and the decomposition of any organic item contribute to generation of methane. So this is how permafrost also contribute to the melting of permafrost also contribute to generation of methane, right? Similarly, if we talk about two other things, two other gases, that is nitrogen dioxide. Actually, nitrogen dioxide is produced out of various things. For example, during industry it is produced as a byproduct. However, it's one of the most significant production is from incomplete combustion. Incomplete combustion of fuel. So in our automobiles, whenever there is incomplete combustion of fuels, nitrogen dioxide is produced, right? Then there is one more gas we were discussing about, the chlorofluorocarbon. As I have told you, it was earlier used for refrigeration purpose as a coolant, right? However, it has huge impact on of trapping sun's heat, and that is why later on its use was reduced. In fact, it was stopped being used as a coolant now. So it is not used today. Earlier it was used, but today it is not used, right? So this we have seen up till now. We have understood that what is climate change, what is greenhouse gas effect, and how certain gases are creating greenhouse gas. We have also discussed the impacts and the way these gases are being produced. So now we would be studying about yes. So we were learning about the climate change, right? So we have discussed about certain gases, their properties, how they are produced and how they impact the greenhouse gas effect. Remember, greenhouse gas effect is different from climate change. So up till now we have discussed about the greenhouse gas effect. Now remember, greenhouse gas defect and climate change are two different things. They shall not be interchanged. Greenhouse effect is a different thing and climate change is a different thing. Now let us come back to our discussion. Whatever we were discussing about the four important gases, namely the nitrogen dioxide, the carbon dioxide, the methane. The methane is here, and then we discussed about chlorofluorocarbons. So we discussed about four important gases, and these gases are responsible for greenhouse gas effect, right? So this is greenhouse gas effect. But the main topic of today's discussion is climate change. Now let us jump to climate change. Climate change is a long-term change in climate or a long-term change in weather patterns. That is, for example, earlier there used to be more rains during post July, right? If rainfall, the amount of rainfall started reducing continuously, which is against the general trend, is called as climate change. Similarly, earlier there used to be less heat waves. However, so earlier there used to be lesser heat waves. However, nowadays we see there is rise in heat waves. So this is a climate change phenomenon. Earlier there used to be less floods. Now the frequency of floods are increasing. This is also a climate change phenomena. For example, earlier there used to be the sea level was at low level. Nowadays, year by year it is increasing. It is a phenomena of climate change, right? So remember, this is the difference between climate change and greenhouse gas effect. Now greenhouse gas effect is a contributor to climate change. Remember, greenhouse gas is not climate change. Greenhouse gas is a contributor to climate change. So let us discuss, now we have discussed greenhouse gas effect and climate change. Now let us discuss the now let us discuss the so we discussed about the climate change. Now let us discuss the impact of climate change. What are the impacts of climate change, right? So imagine if earth's temperature is rising, what would happen? The first and most important impact is the melting of glacier. Melting of glacier. So we see the snow cover at Arctic region and Antarctic region is day by day reducing. This is the one of the most important impact of climate change, right? This is the most important impact of climate change. Now if these glaciers are melting, the glacier are actually the ice. So if this ice would melt, this would convert into what? This would convert into water, and this water will go where? In the oceans, of course. And if this water is going in the ocean, the water level of the ocean would obviously increase. Now what happens is the coastal region would be the worst sufferers. What would happen? When the ocean level goes up, the land at coastal region would start submerging. Just a minute. So this water would result into sea level rise. Okay? Now as sea level would rise, the coastal area would be flooded. For example, it is estimated that when sea level would rise, the island of Maldives would completely submerge. Similarly, the region of Gujarat in India would be submerged. Some part of West Bengal would also submerge. A large part of Bangladesh, 40% of Bangladesh is expected to submerge by 2050. Now this would impact seriously. Why? Because if this land would submerge, yes, if the land would submerge, the crops that people are growing on that piece of land, they would not be able to grow that. If they are not able to grow that particular crop, there would be challenges over food security. And you all know, if food security is compromised, then there are chances of hunger and starvation. This would result into poor immunity and deaths, right? Poor immunity and deaths. So this would result into a serious problem. Similarly, if there would be deaths, there would be starvation and death. One more important factor would be yes, the people who are living on that piece of land which is submerged under the water, they would have to move on to different piece of land. So for example, if 40% of Bangladesh is submerged, what would happen? A large number of refugees, a large number of people seeking shelter would cross their border and would come to a safe land. In case of Bangladesh, it is India, the neighboring country. So this would create a lot of climate refugees. These people are called as climate refugees because they are suffering the burn of climate change. So that is why not only for coastal region, in fact the areas or the countries surrounding these coastal region would also be indirectly impacted by the climate change, right? Let me show you a picture of how it would look. So these people are actually what? They are moving. This would be the classic image of what it would look when people from Bangladesh would be moving towards India, right? So they are called as climate refugees. And not only during the extreme during the extreme effect, even in normal days we can see the effect in crop production. For example, recently we saw in India there was a effect called as El Nino effect was visible. However, El Nino is a natural event, but its intensity depends upon the climate change. What happens in El Nino is the arrival of monsoon and the quantity of rain that reduces. Now, if the monsoon season changes and large part of the country is rain fed, large part of country is rain fed. So, if the amount of rain, the quantity of water coming would reduce, it would result into a huge suffering for farmers because they would not be able to water their crops. And it was recently visible during the El Nino effect. The onion crop, the crop of onion suffered. In fact, we see recently there was a price rise in onion. So this price rise in onion was a example of how climate change can result into our food security, can harm our food security. Okay, so let us move on. So as you see, there would be rise in intensity of events like heat waves, right? And you know what happens during heat waves. A recent example in Uttar Pradesh, I think in Balia district it happened. Large number of people suddenly reached the hospital and the hospital was flooded with patients. Why? Because there was those people were sufferer of heat waves. So it would result into what? Compromise on public health. Right? Similarly, even in these we were discussing about the all of this was a part of terrestrial ecosystem. Terrestrial ecosystem. The impact of climate change would also affect the marine ecosystem. Yes, the marine ecosystem. What would happen in marine ecosystem? You see in marine ecosystem there are corals. What are corals? Corals are the habitat site of fish and other living organism. Now over these corals there is a algae. This algae is called as zooxanthellae algae. Right? So this is a coral. This is a coral and this is a zooxanthellae algae. Now this algae is a food for fish. Now fish come here over the coral and the fish has its food from the algae and then it goes back to the ocean. But what would happen? Due to climate change, if the temperature, the surrounding is the seawater, right? Around this coral, even over the coral would be seawater. If the temperature of this seawater is too high temperature, these algae cannot grow. Why? Because these algae cannot sustain high temperatures. And when this algae is unable to sustain the high temperature, it would destroy. And when these algae would not be available, there would be question over the food security of the fishes. And when fishes would not be able to have their food, the entire food chain would suffer. And because of these fishes, the larger fishes would also be impacted. And then sharks, then whales, and then entire marine ecosystem would be impacted. So climate change has a wide impact. Even we are not able to completely identify how much or how larger would be the impact of climate change. So climate change is a very terrible thing and it would have a very high intensity and it would be having a very high and very impactful impact, very high and very huge impact on the ecosystem, right? So what shall be done? Now this is the real question. We have discussed what is climate change, we have discussed the issues. Now the question is, what shall be done? If the situation is so pathetic, what shall be done? This is the real question. So there are two things that we can do. Right? The situation is very terrible. Now we have solution. What are these two things? The first thing is we can go for mitigation. We can go for mitigation. What is mitigation? Reducing the impact of climate change. This is mitigation. Or the second thing that we can do is adoption or adaptation, right? Adaptation that we will do. What is adaptation? Adapting to the climate change. For example, climate change is increasing. Let's say the rainfall is becoming irregular. Then we should grow such crops which are less dependent on rainfall. Or similarly, if there is a rise in cases of heat waves, we must strengthen our healthcare infrastructure, and even lifestyle should be changed. For example, having more water daily, right? So this is an example of adaptation, that is adopting ourselves to the climate change. So these are two things that can be done. So let us now look at mitigation. So we were discussing about mitigation of, yes, the mitigation. So how to reduce the impact of climate change? One of the best example, as I have told you, is afforestation. Because forests act as natural sink for carbon dioxide and the greenhouse gases. Now as the amount of carbon dioxide or the greenhouse gas would reduce, obviously their tendency to trap the outgoing radiation would reduce, and this would result into reduction in temperature rise. So one is afforestation. Second is reducing those activities which result into formation of such gases like CO2, nitrogen dioxide, methane or chlorofluorocarbon. So recently there was a convention was signed a few years ago, in which earlier chlorofluorocarbon was used as a coolant, but now the use of chlorofluorocarbon is banned. This is an example in the direction of mitigating climate change. Now climate change is being mitigated by reducing the pollution. So on this line, on this point of reducing the pollution or reducing the greenhouse gas, particularly the carbon dioxide, there are several international conventions, because you see, climate change is not a national problem. Climate change is not something that would affect only one country. It would affect the entire globe. It would affect Maldives, it would affect Bangladesh, and as I have told you, indirectly it would also affect India, USA, Canada, UK. The entire world would be impacted, and that is why the solution lies in a global collaboration. A global collaboration is needed. So for we see there are certain conventions. Actually, this problem was recognized in 1972 Stockholm Conference. But the most concrete effect came into effect in 1992 when there was a Rio de Janeiro Rio de Janeiro conference. So in this conference there was a plan was decided that each and every country, a member state, each and every nation, they would meet once a year. So every year there shall be a meeting of the global community, so where they would be discussing about the global issue like climate change. So it was decided in Rio de Janeiro, right? So post 1992 there was a institution in Rio de Janeiro, a framework was signed. It is called as United Nations Framework for Climate Change. United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change, right? This was signed, and this resulted into what? An event called as Conference of Parties, COP. So every year post 1992, one of the member country host a conference of party, and all the member countries, all the members of the Framework Convention on Climate Change visit the host country. They meet there and then they decide their action plan for future. So similarly, various COPs are done. This Conference of Party 1 was done in 1993. COP2 in 94. Similarly, COP3, COP4, this was going on. One of the most important conference of party was COP3. In COP3, the conference of party 3, it happened in a city called Kyoto of Japan, Japan. In city of Kyoto, Japan, COP3, Conference of Party 3 was happening. In this particular meeting, the member countries decided that now some concrete steps has to be taken, and Kyoto Protocol was being signed. Kyoto Protocol. So Kyoto Protocol was signed. What is Kyoto Protocol? Kyoto Protocol is simple a system of exchange between member nation in which they exchange their carbon credit. What is carbon credit? For example, there are two countries and it is decided that two countries would reduce the amount of carbon by 100 tons per year. So let's say Germany and India are two countries. Now they were expected to reduce 100 tons of carbon in 1 year. However, Germany failed to do so. Now Germany didn't reduce the 100 ton of carbon. However, India on the other hand reduced more than what it was expected. Let's say India reduced 200 ton of carbon. Now the extra 100 ton of carbon that India has reduced, India can transfer that to Germany's credit. And what would happen then? In return, Germany would pay India, let's say, some cash, some fund, or through technology transfer, so that India can generate some renewable energy, some some techniques or some non-polluting industries that India can get from Germany. This is called as the Kyoto Protocol arrangement. This is actually the carbon credit arrangement, and it was legally binding through Kyoto Protocol, right? So this is why Kyoto Protocol, the COP3 at Kyoto in 1997 it was. COP3 at Kyoto is most important, and it adopted the Kyoto Protocol, right? So it adopted the Kyoto Protocol, and then Similarly, conference of parties continued, even till date they are continuing. One of the most important conference of party was COP21, Conference of Party 21, that happened in Paris, right? And the year was 2015. This is one of the most important conference of parties. If you are reading the newspaper, if you are studying about climate change, you cannot miss the most important conference of party. It is the Paris COP21 Paris. That happened in 2015. What happened in this conference of party? In COP21, it happened that certain promises were made. What are these promises? The first promise is to limit the temperature rise to 2% by 2100. So temperature is rising continuously every year, but one promise was made, or one agreement was made, that the nations in the entire world would together contribute to reduce the temperature change or the increase in temperature by 2% only by 2100, this year, right? So from 2015 to 2100, the rise in temperature shall be limited to 2%. 2% of what? 2005 level. Further, this is the 2% is the deadline. The second thing is, the nations would also try to ensure their action would be guided in the direction to limit the temperature rise further by 1.5 degrees Celsius. This is how they would reduce the climate change impact. So earlier there was various issues. Some big countries would not be part of it. USA refused to be part of it. Then later on Russia joined it, and when the 50% of nation, those nations who are polluting, out of them the 50% polluters, if they agree to certain thing, then the agreement is accepted. So when Russia joined it, it became enforceable, right? In this slide, one more issue is also I think necessary to discuss, and this is the CBDR. What is CBDR? CBDR is common but differentiated responsibility. What is CBDR? Common but differentiated responsibility. What is this? Actually, the most important thing of CBDR is, why CBDR is important or what is CBDR is, there are two kind of nations. One is a very poor nation and one is a very rich nation. The best example is, let's say, USA and India. So what happens here is, USA is a very rich country and India is a poor country. So the type of pollution here is the luxury emission. And the kind of emission here is living issue emission. That is, USA is emitting because of having a good standard of living. They are using more paper, they are using more energy, they are using lights and everything, they are using more electricity. However, in India the pollution is because we do not have resources. In India the pollution is because of our poor infrastructure, because most of the people, the poor people, do not have access to LPG gases. and that is why women in poor household are forced to use the firewood, and firewood itself is a very polluting source of energy. However, to sustain our life, we have to do that. However, to sustain our life, we have to do that. Also, USA, you see, USA was a country where industrial revolution happened, and India was a colony at that point of time, right? So in colonies there were no industrial revolution, and the industries of USA are very developed. So historically they have created a large amount of greenhouse gas emission. So USA, UK, Canada, the developed world has a historical responsibility of climate change, because the concept of climate change came into picture after 1972, but before 1972 the process was happening. And even post 1850, the industrial revolution, they established, USA, Canada, or the developed world, they established a large number of polluting industries, and due to which the effect of that pollution that they created earlier is visible now, and it is impacting now. So the developing and the less developing country like India, Pakistan, China, Indonesia, Brazil, they are saying that the developed world has to take historical responsibility of what they have done. So the action regarding climate change, according to the developed world, the action regarding climate change has to be in that level. That is, the developed world has to have more action. The developed world has to pay more. So for example, if there is climate change issue and it is said that every country has to reduce their carbon dioxide, so the developing world like India is saying, if we are reducing 50 tons of carbon, then USA or the developed world must at least reduce 500 ton of carbon. This is an example I am giving, right? Or rather, the developed world must transfer funds and technology, that is the clean technology with which developing country like India reduce their emission by 50 tons or whatever the goal is. So there has been demand of, this is called as common but differentiated responsibility. So I think this is understood. Then there is also a demand of Global Climate Fund, GCF, sometimes also called as Green Fund. What is this Green Fund? It is nothing but the demand of developing or the poor country from the developed world that a regular amount of money shall be mobilized for the development or for the sustainable living of the poor countries. And in fact, India is very vocal for such demand. So this is called as the Green Fund or the Global Climate Fund, GCF, right? So India has been putting a huge pressure, and it is saying that at least $100 billion per year shall be contributed by the developed world to the developing countries, including India, the poor countries of Nigeria, Somalia, Madagascar, Brazil, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, etc. So this is the Global Climate Fund. So COP is happening every year. One of the most important conference of party was, I think, recently in COP26 at Glasgow, UK. What happened in that? In COP26 Glasgow, UK, India presented a very important contribution, a very important INDC. What is INDC? INDC. The full form is Intended Nation Determined Contribution. What is INDC? Intended National Determined Contribution. So what is INDC is actually each and every country in the COP, in the meeting, in the regular meeting, they tell the entire world community what are the steps or what are the promise that they are making towards the mitigation of climate change. And it is non-binding. The nations take this contribution voluntarily. So on a voluntary scale, these nations took INDCs, Intended National Determined Contribution. This happened at a voluntary level. So in COP26 Glasgow, UK, India came up with some most important INDCs. One of these INDC were actually given by Prime Minister Modi as Panchamrit. So actually five promises were made by India, and Prime Minister Modi called it as Panchamrit, right? So you can read on internet what are these five promises. One of the most important promise was India is going to be a net zero emitter by 2070. What is net zero emitter? Net zero emitter is the amount of carbon dioxide that we would be producing through our economic activities, because industries are there would be obviously generation of carbon dioxide. Whatever amount of carbon dioxide that we would be producing, we would compromise that, or we would absorb that amount of carbon dioxide through the internal mechanism or the amount of forest or the carbon sink that we are having. That is, let's say today we are producing 200 tons of carbon dioxide, and the amount of forest that we have, the scale of forest that we have, we are able to only absorb 50 tons of carbon dioxide. But what this net zero at 2070 means is, at 2070, this year, at the year 2070, if we would be generating let's say 500 ton of carbon dioxide through our industries, we would also scale up our forest or the carbon sink so as to absorb 500 tons of carbon dioxide every year. So the overall emission of carbon dioxide from India would be a zero. This is called as the net zero emission. So this is one of the most important promise made by India. Post 2070, we would become a net zero emitter. Similarly, India is also starting up certain initiative like the International Solar Alliance, ISA. What would happen here is, in International Solar Alliance, India along with like-minded tropical countries, India is establishing some solar grids. Solar power plant, as you all know, is a renewable source of energy, and the fossil fuel are actually the polluting source of energy. So it is against the fossil fuel use of energy and use of solar energy, which is a renewable source of energy and a non-polluting, non-carbon generating source of energy. So India is also focusing on solar energy. So I think this is something. These are some of the most important things that we have discussed today. And now linking it to current affairs. What is happening now? So if we see today, COP28 is happening. COP26 was happened at Glasgow, UK. Then COP26 Conference of Party 27 happened at Madrid, Spain, where they could not reach any particular solution. Now COP28 is happening in Dubai, that is UAE. Which year? 2023. So it is going on now. And recently Prime Minister Modi has given certain statement that India would like to host the COP33 in 2028 in India. This is what Prime Minister Narendra Modi offered to the international community. COP33 at India, right? Also some important events that happen in COP28 in Dubai. This is happening today, not today, this is happening nowadays. One more important event happened is that the government of India, along with most of the developing countries, has said that they are not willing to switch to carbon. They are not ready to completely phase out of carbon, phase out of coal. This is what government of India along with developing country is saying, that we are not in the mood of completely phasing out of coal. So remember what is phasing out? There are two terms, phase out or phase down. Phase out is completely ending the use of coal based energy sources. Now if we see the development stage that India is in, the current phase of development where we are, we cannot completely remove the coal fired power plants. Though we are developing, but we are not at that stage of development that we can completely leave the coal based fire power plants or the coal based energy sources. Most of the power plants in India are coal based, and that is why we are currently not at that stage that we leave the coal based fire power plants. So India along with developing country has said that they are not currently able to phase out the coal. Actually the developed world including UK, USA, Canada is pressurizing the developing country like India, China, Indonesia to phase out the coal use. The developed world can phase out the use of coal because they are having high level of industries. Their industries are very much developed than our industries. And that is why the developed world like India, the developing world like India, China, Indonesia, they cannot phase out coal. So this is a dispute, this is so diplomacy is going around the issue. This is the differences are there between developing world and the developed world. Similarly, even the host country like UAE, the Arab world has their own set of interests. What is the interest of Arab world? Remember, UAE, the host country, is also a Arab country. They are the largest exporter of oil and gas, natural oil and gas. Now what happen is, if the entire climate change idea is against the use of fossil fuel, now if the world started avoiding the fossil fuel and they completely depend on renewable energy sources, who would purchase oil from the Arab world? Now if there are no purchaser of oil, whom they would sell their oil, and oil contributes a significant amount of revenue generation for the Arab world like UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Iran. They have a significant revenue earned from their oil exports. Now if the world is shifting towards renewable energy and now they are against the idea of fossil fuel like oil and petroleum, the Arab world would be at loss. So Arab world is also against this idea. So recently there was certain controversy when certain I think some important figure in UAE questioned the idea of climate change itself. So there are disagreements regarding this thing also. So diplomacy is going on, and there are certain differences, certain agreements are there, and this is how diplomacy works. So I think this is what is needed for you to know. I think I have completed all the necessary topics, all the necessary information that you need in this single lecture. So now you need not to refer anything else, just go through this lecture and this is enough. If you like this video, please like this video on YouTube and subscribe to our channel. Thank you.